Here in Unit 4, we're going to start talking about the exercise of planning. And I think God just made some people planners and other people not. I must say that I had to learn to love planning. I was probably not as structured until I had to start managing other people, and then I really started to understand the value of well laid out plans. Let me start out by saying that project plans describe an aspiration for how you're going to deliver a certain set of outcomes within a specific time frame and with a specific resource or quantity and quality of resource. And cross-team dependencies are spelled out typically in the plan as well. How your project team relates to another project team would be an example of that. And a couple key points in that. One is that it's an aspiration. I've never seen a project go exactly according to plan, and that's part of the fun. But I've also seen projects go very, very well and have both positive and negative variations to the plan. So it does happen where projects are delivered, with more outcome than was expected, or at less budget, or more quickly. And the better you get at project management, the better you get at the planning phase. So an important thing to keep in mind. I'm quoting Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who I probably pronounced that very incorrectly, but the quote I like from him is that a goal without a plan is just a wish, and I think that directly applies to the need to kind of have a plan. And project plans are dynamic for longer and more complex efforts, and we talked a bit about programs being collections of projects and sort of series of projects that can go out over time. And it's not that uncommon to have a project plan at a low level of detail for the things that you're going to do over the next couple of days, months, even years, but then leave further phases at a higher level of detail and not necessarily go to the same level of detail, in part because there's lots of uncertainty of what you'll be doing a year from now, but there's less uncertainty on what you should be doing a month from now. So, a general principle to sort of think about there. Now we're going to talk about something called a work breakdown structure, and the first time I heard that phrase, I was perplexed. I didn't really know what it meant. But really, all it is a structure, right? It's a way of breaking things down and decomposing them into increasing levels of detail. So, if you will, projects can be broken down into phases. Phases can have activities. Activities can be broken down further into tasks, and tasks can be subtasked, and you could keep going if you wanted to. In my early project management days, I used to probably go to a lot more detail than my project teams would have liked. But as sort of we gain confidence in each other, we started to move up a little bit and not necessarily plan at the subtask level or the subtask level, but plan at the task level. And work breakdown structures, are very much related to the team that's executing them. If a team is new together and the chance of miscommunication is higher, a more detailed plan tends to make sense. More agile teams that work together more fluidly may in fact try to have less of a detailed plan and just know how to manage together more effectively. But I usually find that even in very mature and agile planning environments and execution environments, there's a lot of use in having formalized planning. The phases, activities, tasks, and subtasks should be complete. They should cover all the activities at least at the same level of detail. You want to make sure that everything you need to do is sort of on there at that appropriate level of detail. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the other cool thing about these work breakdown structures is as you develop them, you can reuse them. So I used in the last video the example of opening a new patient intake center, but you can imagine, that if you wanted to do a project to deal with the checkout process, right? When somebody is ready to leave your facility, either for daycare or somebody who's been resident in one of your beds for a while, you could grab the same project plan and it would be a good starting point to do an improvement project around the checkout process. That's one of the best things about evolving a maturity institutionally in project management is the opportunity to learn, but more about that later. So I decided to use an example I think we all could understand, and depending on the number of people you're preparing meals for, the formality of the planning may take different sizes and shapes. But when we think about making dinner at a high level, we can start by saying, hey, we collect ingredients, we prepare the ingredients. We cook and we serve, and then we have to clean up. Not my favorite part of the equation, by the way. But that's at a high level of detail. Those are the high level activities. You could start to think about, okay, what does it mean to collect ingredients? And maybe we would break that down by type of ingredient. So we've got to pick the vegetables, and specifically pick the maize and pick the bananas. But we also have to maybe go to the market and purchase some meat, and maybe purchase some tea to have after our dinner. But you can see that we're going to 1, 2, 3 levels of detail here below the make dinner project, and it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. Now, could we go lower? Like, could we say, okay, we're going to the market to pick up the meat. Could we break that into further subtasks? I mean, we could, right? We could say the next stop is, to shop around and take a look at the prices and the quality of the meat in different markets and those kind of things. And we could get increasingly more specific. We don't need to micromanage people, but on the other hand, it's sometimes helpful to go to those lower levels of detail. And over time, I think you'll develop an instinct for what the appropriate level of detail is. So if you want to take a pause now, but certainly when you're conducting this course with other people, I would try to take a project, like take an overnight trip. Imagine that we're going to go visit a more rural community, or maybe even head into the city from a rural community or something like that, and create a work breakdown structure for something like that. And it'll be good practice to sort of do it at the phase level, the activity level, and the task level. Now, the work breakdown structure is not yet a plan. It's an important component of the plan, and you'll see it's represented over here on the left-hand side of my slide. But there's a series of questions that we're going to answer to turn the work breakdown structure into a more formal plan. The first question is, when is each phase, activity, and task going to be done? When do you do them? When do you start them, and when do you finish them? And the second question is, what dependencies between the tasks exist? So as an example of timing, you want to have a sense of when your activities will be done and the relative sequence. So it's pretty hard to cook the vegetables before you actually pick the vegetables. So there's a natural dependency there that you've got to pick the vegetables before you can get to your next phase and prepare the ingredients. So that's pretty obvious. But then also you have to have a goal for the meal as a whole. When do you want to actually eat the meal is pretty important. And that's sort of working backwards, right? If we're going to eat at 6:30 tomorrow evening, and your job is to have the meal ready for 15 or 20 people, you've got to start and work backwards from that. So this slide also depicts a couple of milestones, and milestones are just really important points in time in the project plan when key activities are complete and key outcomes might be visible. We'll talk a bit more about milestones later, but they're very, very important to have in a project plan, and they give you feedback as to, kind of whether you're on course or not. And some projects, they work and work and work and work and don't have any milestones in the interim, and they don't have the opportunity to course correct and make changes if things aren't going well. The next three questions that are important to the plan are going to take a little time to digest, and while I'm going to probably go through this slide fairly quickly, I would expect in conducting this that there's going to be lots of questions and answers. So the first question is, how much work does it take to perform an activity? And many of us haven't thought about this before, but if we have an activity, and let's say that we have to cook or prepare carrots. We know that we have to peel the carrots, we know that we have to cut them, and we know that we have to heat them and get them ready to eat. And there's the question of elapsed time. How long will that take against a clock or against a calendar? But then there's how much labor is involved, how much work is actually involved. And we call that effort estimating. And the amount of effort isn't the same thing as the elapsed time, but I'll try to make that clear through this example. Looking at something like peeling carrots, let's start off with an estimate. Let's say that for our group of, 30 people, we're going to cook 100 carrots, and we're going to have a lot of carrots with the meal. And we might say, hey, it's going to take 2 minutes per carrot to kind of cook it and prepare it and get it ready or get it ready, I should say, to cook it. Bear with me here because I know it doesn't take 2 minutes per carrot, but I think the example is still useful. So roughly the effort that we have to get 100 carrots ready to cook is 200 minutes, which is about 3.5 hours of work for one person. 60 minutes per hour, right? So if it's 3 1/3 hours of work for one person, how many people would it take if you wanted to get it done in an hour? Or asked another way, how long would it take 3 people to get this done? 1 hour approximately. So the idea here is that effort is the amount of work, and then you determine how many people are going to be deployed to do that task or activity, and that will help you figure out how much in elapsed time things are going to take. Now let's go to the tea for a second, the tea part of this meal. Now, based on experience, we might know it takes about 20 minutes to prepare everything for the tea, to get the water ready, and to do what we need to do to get the accompanying service ready and really be in a position to have the tea. And, we're not going to do any math in that. We're just going to plug that into our plan and expect that that takes about 20 minutes ultimately. So I hope that's clear, but when you're teaching this class, it's really important that we separate this out and understand the notion of an effort estimates. It's truly one of the most fundamental concepts in project management. The next question is, who's going to do each one of these tasks? Some tasks may have a single person assigned, some tasks may have multiple people assigned. And there's a couple dimensions that you want to look at. You want to see who's available to actually do the work. You want to look and see what skills they have. And you want to see what their preferences are. what they enjoy doing or what they need to do for their professional development. So I tried to depict this a bit on the right hand side. Let's say that Scott can do anything. He can cook the hot food. He can cook cold food, or get cold food ready. He can serve. He's really able to do all the primary activities. Jonathan and Michael, on the other hand, they don't let us near the hot food. We don't have any skills to be able to use the stove or the oven. So we're not really candidates to do that. And let's go just say Kenneth is able to do everything. Now, the asterisks here indicates the preference. Scott really likes to do work at the stove and the oven. Jonathan really likes to serve the food. Michael likes the cold food, getting that ready and prepared to serve. And Kenneth really also likes working with the hot food. So the preferences, while sometimes viewed as secondary, are something that it's important to understand as a good project manager. The other dimension is availability. Who has the time? Who's not doing something else during the windows of time when these tasks need to be done? And again, I'm forcing this into a short time frame of making dinner, but this would work for projects of much longer periods of time. But let's say that Scott is only available after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Jonathan is only available after 7 p.m. Michael is only available after 6 p.m., but Kenneth is available all day. These are important factors when we come back to our plan and say, okay, not only who's available to do what, but who has the skills to do what. Because dinner preparation starts at 5 o'clock, Scott is available and he has the skill and the preference to work on the hot foods. So, yay, Scott gets to do the hot food. Jonathan is available before 7 p.m. I perhaps misspoke earlier, but he's available before 7 p.m., and therefore he's available to do the cold food. Michael isn't available during the window of time when the cold food needs to be served and cooked, so he's not a candidate to do that. And Michael is available afterwards to help with the last part of that and actually serve the food. So he's not available to help cook the food and prep the food, if that makes sense. So that gives you a little example of how that might work in real life. But we'll go through a more detailed business example in a little bit. The next question we're going to talk about is sort of what are the inputs and outputs of each task. So if we have to go to the market to buy some meat and tea, one of the inputs we need is money. We need shillings or whatever the currency that's appropriate to buy the food at the market. Or maybe we have some credit and we can use that credit as well. But that's an input to one of these tasks or activity, and they're very important to note as part of the task. You won't be able to complete it. And then the deliverable is what does the activity produce? What are the deliverables and outcomes? So in some cases, it's a very tangible deliverable. So after collecting the maize and the carrots or the bananas, we have the carrots and the bananas. They're ready for us, and perhaps they're cleaned or something like that, right? We could put other requirements on it. After we go to the market, we have the meat and the tea, right? And if you can imagine other work breakdown structures for other activities, you're sometimes thinking about outcomes, not just deliverables. So you might say that task is supposed to, generate, in our example from the prior module, that the goal is to get a survey done with the employees to sort of baseline their enjoyment of their jobs. And not only would you get the survey results back, but one of the outcomes might be the synthesis and summarization of those individual surveys. And so sometimes we refer more to outcomes than discrete deliverables. So um, we are going to move into a more detailed example, and it'll make it a little bit more concrete, but I will wait for the next video to do that. Now, I just wanted to wrap up by saying that the definition and planning phase is one that some people who enjoy it might wish to stay in that phase forever. They like thinking about the project more than they like actually doing the project. And some people enjoy, getting to the actual execution. Enough planning is a minute of it, and then they're ready to kind of move on and get working. They're very action oriented. And this demonstrates one of the strengths of a diverse project management team. If some people like to plan and think about what needs to be done, and other people just like to get their hands dirty and get working, that's a pretty good project team if they work well together. If you had a project team of all planners or all get their hands dirty, action-oriented people, you can see how you wouldn't be bringing the full capabilities of the organization to the table. Thank you.